But let Jose tell you something more about Lakshadweep also. I mean, that's, if this is God's own territory, I mean, that's really been preserved. I don't know how now, after 20 years, but before, it was something which was amazing.
Now
Okay.
you got
So, yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting, but it's 8:04. Few guests have already joined in. People may join in, but I think we can go live now, sir. Shall we?
So, Happy New Year, and of course, the greatest of pleasure seeing the two of you. Or rather, three of you now. Mohit, I know Mohit from another time before.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Talwar. The last time we saw you on this forum, it was your anniversary. And so today you can say we are doing an extension of the celebrations of that time. It's
So,
also good to be back in Kerala. Wholeheartedly, I welcome everyone who has been able to tune in at this point of time. My name is Mohit Gupta. I'm the founder of City Book Leaders. And with Mr. MP Joseph, we have taken the responsibility and also the Kerala Museum. The idea is to showcase you all that's Kerala. And today is we have the doyen of the tourism industry in Kerala because it's our dozen episode. So the doyen, the dozen, they go all together. And today is definitely a very, very interesting session for us because we're going to know what it took to build the tourism for Kerala when everyone started coming to God's own country. I welcome Jose Dominique. We with us. We have Mr. Rajiv Talwar today as our eminent guest. And with all three of you, gentlemen, with your old discussions that you can have from your yesteryears as well, the show is yours. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mohit. Thanks as always. And thanks everybody for your continued patronage of All That's Kerala, chat along the backwaters. As Mohit said, this is the 12th episode of this fortnightly program, and it's being presented by City Book Leaders, who, which is represented, whose creator is Mohit, and Kerala Museum, the one in Edapalli. Aditi is not here, but she's the one who represents Kerala Museum on this program. We have designed this program as something that introduces Kerala to the country and to the world, and of course to Kerala itself. Let me start off by thanking Mohit of City Book Readers and Aditi of the Kerala Museum, Kochi, for being with us, for supporting this program. We have with us Rajiv Talwar, who's a close colleague of Mr. Jose Dominique, who is our guest today. So welcome very quickly, Rajiv Talwar and Jose
Thank
Dominique.
you.
Today's episode is on the backbone of economic Kerala, a sector that provides employment and brings in tons of money to the state. Today's episode is on tourism. Kerala is a traveler's paradise. The world knows the state so well. I was surprised when about a year ago, or less than a year ago, the BBC in its hourly news bulletins, the weather bulletins at the end of the news, would start talking about Kerala. Till about a year ago, they had never mentioned Kerala. They would talk of South India, they would talk of Bombay or Chennai and Sri Lanka and Colombo, but never about Kerala. Even today, the BBC news bulletin, the weather bulletin at 12, at 1, carried Kerala. So Kerala has come to worldwide attention. What brought Kerala to this worldwide attention? And I would say my answer is that it is tourism in Kerala. The way Kerala has sold God's own country is the one that has brought this worldwide renown for Kerala. What has transformed Kerala into this global tourist destination? Of course, it's its natural beauty, the waterways, the hills, the mountains, the tea gardens, the houseboats, the hills, Munnar, Wayanad. I think the list is endless. But all these were always there for centuries, for decades. They were all part of Kerala, but Kerala came into the tourist destination map only about 40 years ago in the 1980s. So what happened in the 80s that transformed a state which always had a lot of natural beauty into a global tourist destination? What changed in the 1980s? Perhaps the question should be reframed a little bit. So I'll reframe it thus. It is not what changed the image of Kerala. I would say I would reframe the question as, in the 1980s, who changed the focus on Kerala and brought focus to Kerala as a tourist haven? The answer is before us today. The answer is with us today. It is Sri Jose Dominique, doyen of the tourism industry in Kerala and the co-founder of the Casino Group of Hotels, known for about a decade and a half as the Casino Group of Hotels, but it is now known as CGH Earth. And he'll explain to you why it's called CGH Earth. I think it stands for maybe it's better to leave him to explain it. So welcome viewers. As always, please feel free to key in your questions and I'll ask Sri Dominic to answer them as time permits. May I welcome you, Mr. Jose Dominic, to All That's Kerala Chat along the backwaters. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to have you with us this evening. Let me begin by saying that tourism in India till the 1980s mainly meant the tourist triangle, Delhi, Agra, Bombay. You broke that triangular monopoly of tourism in India and brought Kerala in as a tourist destination, a global one. You're undoubtedly the one person who put Kerala on the global tourism map with the work you first did in Bangaram and then later what you did at the Spice Village in Munnar, and of course the houseboats, the Kumaragam Lake Resort, then Maradi Kulam and so on. So starting from just one hotel which your father had built, the Casino Hotel, which of course was in the picturesque Wellington Island in Cochin, you took the Casino Group, but Kerala itself, into a different stratospheric height of tourism. One of the factors of this growth, to quote you, Mr. Jose Dominic, you said that Kerala has been green, but what kept Kerala green? And let me quote you, you said, red flags kept Kerala green. That seems a contradiction. Can I begin this conversation by asking you, what did you mean when you told me the other day that red flags kept Kerala green?
Yes, let me thank you, Mr. MP Joseph. Hi, Rajiv Talwar, and I'm glad to be on this program. But first, let me begin with a small correction that you asked what happened in the 80s. Then you changed it to who made it happen. It is not Jose Dominic, but it was the small entrepreneurs of Kerala who made the change. Starting from that, 80s is a period, you said. And let me go back a little before that. That red kept Kerala green is a statement I've always been making. And sometimes the red says it's a backhanded slap. But really, what happened is that when you go back a little more, at independent India, Kerala had a period of turmoil, and red was very visible. And we had the first communist government under E.M.S. Namboodiripad. And the image that came out from Kerala was, there is trade unionism is rife. And as a result, two things happened. One, foreign direct investment refused to come. Therefore, I say the smokestacks were kept out. As a consequence of that, what happened in Kerala? The Malayali mother told his boy child and his girl child also, study well so that you can go away. And they did both. They studied well and they went away to other Indian cities at beginning, to around the world, and then in historic numbers to the Gulf. And in fact, much later, in another event which happened in Kerala called Emerging Kerala, the then Chief Minister's keynote address said the two change makers of Kerala were two. One, the phenomenon of NRK, and the other is tourism. And what did the NRK do? Brought in remittances into the state. What did tourism do? It created entrepreneurs and it created enterprises. and created jobs. I think that is the one. How did it happen? And I think this is what I think is the biggest lesson from what tourism tells us, that small on entrepreneurs did what they could, which is small, in a manner which they knew, which is local. And to their credit, we could say that indigenous and small became world class, and that is a big achievement.
Mr. Jose Dominic, you also said, keeping on the topic of red keeping Kerala green, you also believe that the left communist governments in Kerala and even the others were scared to treat tourism as a serious department because it was seen as a luxury, capitalist, and bourgeoisie. Tourism was an embarrassment to the state government, but that has changed now. Is that true to a great extent, that tourism was given to the smaller coalition partners in government, and officers who are not very close to the government were given posts in the tourism department at once upon a time? But it's all changed now. Is that true to a great extent?
All that has changed. All that completely changed. I remember a time, I would not call them left and right governments, I would call them left and left of left governments, which Kerala has had. And what has changed is that the tourism has suddenly become, which was at one stage was considered an embarrassment, luxury, capitalist, and bourgeois. It's suddenly become a driver of the economy. It has become creator of jobs and earnings for the state. If there's one industry which Kerala can say that in this sector we have done better or succeeded, it is tourism. So what has changed is that from the weaker coalition partner being given this portfolio, now the stronger coalition partner gets this portfolio. Bureaucrats who were out of power have landed up in this department. Now only bureaucrats in favor landed up here. Everything has changed. So suddenly now tourism now appears to be Kerala. It appears to be Kerala's savior, Kerala's way of telling the world that we too can. And but
it is also, Jose Dominic, one of the largest job creators in Kerala, isn't it? It is
currently the statistics will say that. In fact, just let me that almost 15 lakhs people directly employed in the sector, and many livelihood enterprises have been created. Linkages to farm, linkages to cultural industries, so many other linkages. And it's everywhere, in rural Kerala, in city Kerala, in faraway Kerala, in lakes and beaches. Everywhere it is there. And this is something that brought about a huge change to the attitude that at one time it was said that the weakness of Kerala's weakness of Kerala was the lack of entrepreneurs. Tourism proved that that is a myth. In fact, on the contrary, tourism showed that Kerala has sprung up entrepreneurs on all kinds, and there are people who in disruptive innovators, from houseboats to resorts, which take a different model. And what emerged, as Kerala was a unique model, what emerged a unique model in tourism too, which we can call the Kerala model, which had at its heart environment, community, and local. In other words, the ingredients of responsible tourism. In responsible tourism, which I think is the way that the world sees tourism as an inspiration, aspiration, Kerala now probably can say we have both local, national, and global leadership. And it did not come from because anything imported, neither capital nor knowledge imported. It came from, there's no rocket science that what we did ordinarily became extraordinary. Every day in Kerala can be magic.
You have, Sir Jose Dominic, you have one of the criticism about Kerala is that this state does not have industries. That there are too many labor disputes here, and that labor disputes prevent industrials from coming in. industries from coming in. But the absence of chimney stacks, as you call it, the lack of industrialization, on the one hand, has kept Kerala green, and that has been good for tourism. Isn't that so? So it is, even though industries have become less here, tourism has thrived. So isn't that an advantage that we have had in spite of the labor issues that the state has had?
It is true. That's why I said that red Kerala green was, in a sense, a backhanded slap. But by keeping industrialization low and slow, we had the environment preserved, kept Kerala green. As a consequence, was Kerala was seen as a state for people to come to, a great place to live in. And in a great place to live in is a great place to visit. And Kerala's other achievement, I think, in the early years is our investments in healthcare, in education, in institutions of democracy, all of which created a destination which, I will use a term here, I borrow from a researcher called Peter Adderhold. I use a term here which will say that the alert independent traveler. And he's a new animal which is emerging, and for whom travel was a voyage of discovery. And this was in stark contrast with the traditional traveler, who thrived in the times of the Golden Triangle, which you refer to, Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, that is represented what you expected, quintessential India. The Maharaja with the turban, the elephant, the palace. And Kerala, on the other hand, was modern India, village India, everyday India. And that the ordinary can also be extraordinary with the Kerala story.
You spoke of entrepreneurship having come into Kerala because of tourism, and people showed that they had a great deal of enterprise in them, even though it may not be for setting up multi-crore industries. But in the case of tourism, there was a lot of local entrepreneurship. Did you discover your own entrepreneurship through tourism? You're one of the biggest entrepreneurs in Kerala today.
So when we ventured into, my father had started a hotel way back in 1957, which is a Casino Hotel. I was a chartered accountant, and who wanted to be there, and then by my father's persuasion, I came and joined him in 1978. At that time, the number of tourists, Kerala's share in Indian tourism arrivals was about 1.3%. In the mid 80s or early 80s, 25,000 foreign tourists came to Kerala. It was, as an industry, not relevant. And but the opportunity of tourism as an enterprise, the economic opportunity, was seized by what I again repeat the same term, but I think that's what really happened, is that small entrepreneurs did what they could, which is small, in a manner which they knew, which is local, and yet making it world class. And that really is the Kerala story. World class and recognized globally. Even the UNDP has given the award to Kerala called the Ulysses Award for responsible tourism, for whereby when I say the alert independent traveler, who is he? To understand him, we must look at his opposite, which is the sun, sand, surf traveler. Again, word I borrow from Peter Adderhold. The sun, sand, surf traveler is one who wants everything perfect. 27 degrees Celsius water, white sand, perfect hotel, good coffee, best food and best service. Nothing else matters. The hell with everything else. In stark contrast to him was the other who says everything else matters. He wants to know how people live there. What is their activity? What are their aspirations? What are their fears? What are their pain? And all that is part of the journey of tourism. And this was the kind of traveler which Kerala could attract. And that was the beginning in what you say in the 80s. 25 years, Kerala's growth from being a Bimaru state, using the Hindi term, to become the best performing state as far as tourism is concerned.
The alert independent traveler is a traveler who comes to Kerala. Is that But what brings him here? Is it the uniqueness of Kerala that brought tourists here? The Tanima, the Kerala Tanima that you mentioned, not today, but in a conversation we had earlier. Uh, I think you mentioned three essentials: the architecture of Kerala, the food of Kerala, and the natural beauty of Kerala, the green. Shashi Tharoor once said that Kerala has some 1 dozen varieties of green: the green of the coconut tree, the green of the mango tree, the green of the paddy, the green of the rubber plantations, the green of the tea estates, the green of the grass. He listed out about 1 dozen green. So is it this green, the food, and the architecture that brings the alert, independent traveler to the state?
All of that, but let me just differentiate it slightly. And I think the best term to differentiation is what is inherently Kerala, or the Malayalam term Tanima. Kerala's Tanima. That is
Uniqueness.
what the uniqueness of what is inherently here. And that becomes a shared experience. And there are many other states which are green and greener, oceans and backwaters. While these are strong ingredients of our travel, but I think it is a people element and the 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 magic of every day. When I say that is that it's modern India. It is where there is, in a sense, going back to there, I would say, read in a positive way, egalitarian society, people who have the fair, better paid, less discrimination, and all of that helped to create an. I think the dividend from all of that it was tourism of a kind that did not exist in India before, of a kind which allowed people to travel by themselves to go and live in a remote little home, a homestay, in a farm, far away from it all. And it was all like in like in developed countries and unseen India. You take India itself, Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore, great places, fantastic facilities, but you go far away into rural, there's a sense of fear of whether there is place will be clean enough, neat enough, safe enough. All those fears don't exist in our state. There because there is right across you will have certain amount of similarity, of equity of fight, of resources, of people, uh, clean, much more cleaner, and finally, absolutely safer.
Great. You spoke. I know you spoke earlier about the human development, the human resource, the HEI. I think that's also a factor in it. I'm sure you mentioned it earlier. But let me move on. But things have changed, haven't they, Mr. Dominic? The 2018 Kerala floods, the 2019 floods, and 2020 COVID has hit the Kerala tourism very badly. How do you see Kerala rebooting tourism after these 2018, 2019, and the disaster of 2020, the COVID disaster? How would you see Kerala rebooting itself in 2021?
Let me add one more calamity to the three that you described. At the end, we at the end of the earlier government, there was a policy on alcohol which came out, which said that Kerala can have bar license only in five-star hotels. That was a serious knock on tourism. Our MICE meetings and incentive travel ceased to exist, and that is when that was the first calamity. Luckily, that was reversed, and then we had the 2018, the big flood, which at that time they said it's a once in 100-year event. After that event, and Kerala appealed to the world, help Kerala. Kerala is in distress. So very reluctantly will people come to a distressed destination. So then we had the 2019. Again, we had a catastrophic monsoon, and in between all this, there was Nipah. And one small statistic I would like to mention here before COVID is that the tourism department published some statistics in January 2020, which said that October 2019, November 2019, December, and January 2020, Kerala's numbers in terms of arrivals were the highest and the best in our history. It was a spring back from, despite all these calamities. So it really showed that the resilience of the destination and the resilience more of the people, the entrepreneurs, who could, despite having received such a big knock, they were back on their feet in even more strength. We hope that, of course, the COVID calamity is bigger than all of that to be put together. And we believe, and I think there is the strength that Kerala can have, that we can spring back again.
Speaking of COVID, you divided COVID into three phases: BC, DC, and PC, if I remember right. Can you explain what this BC, DC, and PC of COVID is?
In
And
that
how it impacts on
terminology,
tourism?
BC is before COVID, DC during COVID, and PC post-COVID, which is what we are hoping for. Before COVID, the story of Kerala is a remarkable story. During COVID, also a remarkable story. I think the actions that Kerala could take to arrest and contain the virus got worldwide attention. Therefore, during COVID actions, which meant there was the conflict between life and livelihood. Livelihood paid a very, very heavy price. Tourism was the first hit, worst hit, and longest hit. The industry fell literally off the cliff. It did not slide down, when we dropped to zero. And that was what has happened. And from that is now the struggle to get back on the feet, and then, using this term, to hope that we can reboot God's own country to another level. I think the biggest advantage which comes from calamities, or to use a calamity, is that people are then now prepared for transformational change. Things that we could not do in the past now seem possible. Action that we can take. So the aspiration is that for now we realize that for Kerala's growth, survival, or revival, is we have to become the cleanest, the greenest, and the healthiest among the destinations of the world. And I'm sure that we have what it takes to get there.
You see, to me, somebody comes to Kerala only post-COVID, PC, if they are sure that it is tourist safe. How do you make Kerala tourist safe? How do you give confidence to national and international travelers that Kerala is a COVID safe destination? One thing I would say is for the government to give priority vaccination free of cost to those in the tourism sector. But you must have other ideas as well. How do you make the traveler feel that Kerala is COVID safe? That is a COVID safe destination.
I think it's a sense of confidence, of safety, will not come from just the action during DC, but the history of the state, on how we've been able to manage other calamities, whether the flood or even the Nipah. And now during COVID times, the industry is so organized. And while, of course, across the world, we have now introduced COVID protocols, and everybody does that. But the sense of confidence with one approaches the state about, thanks to, let us say, the high human development factor that Kerala has, the confidence that can come. You take a taxi in Kerala, and you take taxi anywhere else in the world, anywhere else in India. You see how the vehicle is, the driver's attitude, and there's a world of difference which is acknowledged. Even hotels, small hotels, Kerala hotels are not the 5-star, the big 500-room hotels. Now here, let me just narrate a small story, little bit. I'm a member of the Ecotourism Society of India. we organize workshops across the country. And before COVID time, and during BC, we organized one in Goa. And the Goa participants were very active, young tour operators, young hoteliers, restaurateurs, all came in there and participated there. Activists, really. And I remember one seeing me, and maybe another person from Kerala there. He in his talk he said some facts he revealed. Goa's population is 14 lakhs. Goa's footfall is 64 lakhs. And then he said, look at these people from Kerala. Their red flag meant that the FDI did not come. But in our state, we laid out the red carpet for investors, and they came in big numbers. They made the 500-room and 5-star hotels, which displays the biggest flags, brand flags of the world. Now look at the situation, is that in Kerala, the entrepreneurs who started these small little hotels, they are the owners, the managers, and they are directing the way things happen. We are happy for what happened in Kerala, but in Goa, but we got jobs as waiters and cooks and drivers in the 5-star hotel. I was just comparing the two. That's how the Kerala, thanks to the investors not coming in and local investors have to make up for it. And the other case, when outsiders come and invest, not necessarily represent advantaged local population is what the story was.
A couple of questions have come in. One is whether things like Travel Mart has helped in the past. Will it help post-COVID? And also this question from, I think, Sri Kumar it is. He says, the tagline, God's own country, has it not been overused? Is it not time to change it?
Well, that's a God's own country is ageless. Now about the Travel Mart, let me again hear that in the year 2000 was a year in which a mart was organized in Kerala, the first mart by an organization of a society of entrepreneurs, of small entrepreneurs of the state, in a strong participation with the government. And that is the Kerala Travel Mart, which turns out to be, as over the years, once in 2 years, it has turned out to be the largest travel marketing event of India, bigger than every other event in the country, and that too happening in the far corner of the country in a small state called Kerala. So here I'm just trying to say that the ability of travel marts, tourism, including participation of people, is the model that Kerala is able to achieve, and maybe to an extent it has happened because it's all local, it's all indigenous. There's a sense of like in Bangalore, Karnataka, they will say, "Nammada metro, here's Nammada tourism." The sense of ownership is very, very strong here, and that's really worked well for our state, and the close sense of pride and participation which the local population has, the ability for people to enter for even new, small, and with little capital to enter the industry, to start little homestay and make it brilliantly work. There are brilliant stories in Kerala. Unlike other stories would be big capital, big know-how coming in from world capitals.
What about the tagline, God's own country? What about the tagline? You think it should change now? It's been overused?
That's okay. I mean, in terms of marketing advice, would be God's own country, something which is stuck to Kerala. Say the word tourism in any forum, let's say in Delhi, the word that comes to mind to people is Kerala. Say the word Ayurveda, the word that comes to their mind is Kerala. So when they say tourism, the word God's own country comes in, and God's own country represents things that it's well, like a paradise. So I don't know whether it's necessary at all to change it.
Right.
It
Thank you.
works well.
I'll go back to the rebooting of Kerala post-COVID (PC). You see, one of the things that COVID has taught us is that we have to be very careful about viruses. We have to be clean if we have to attract tourists. Kerala is a very clean place, but then viruses can exist if there's a lot of waste. We got to learn to manage waste. Strict environment regulations need to be there. Our backwaters need to be cleaned, and we should not be putting waste into the backwaters, because these are things that can encourage viruses, and that's something that can bring back diseases. So post-COVID, how do you see waste management as an aspect of tourism?
I think that's a very important point that has come in there. Our best resource, say if it's the backwaters, it's also the rivers which come from our mountains, bring in, keep the water to the brim. Our cities across the backwaters also fill the backwaters with their waste, both solid and liquid. Our farms in the mountains, the pesticides all flow into the backwaters. And today, at one time, just to give an example, a friend of mine, a lawyer, he built a house in Cochin some years back in the 80s, and the first house which was backwater facing. At that time, he built the house in such a way that he could take a swim in the backwaters every day. Today, that is no longer possible. Today, if you touch the backwaters, you want to wash your hands with Dettol. That this is a no-go situation. The strong action that is required, I think, in a situation like the COVID, perhaps will prompt government and make the public accept strong action, that there's no compromise to managing our waste, both liquid and solid. There's no compromise whatsoever. Take Kochi, the mega city, it hardly has sewerage systems. We are now got used to using our backwaters and canals as a sewerage system. This will not happen. This cannot happen. This cannot be. It will be too unsafe to happen. We don't know what kind of concoction or what kind of germs, what kind of viruses will breed in this concoction called the backwater in that situation.
Right.
So
You also, it's a post-COVID. There's also a need to make Kerala a more organic state. Sikkim is an example, I believe. You mentioned that in a conversation we had earlier. What is your view on attracting tourists through transforming Kerala into an organic state? And what is an organic state? Many of our viewers may not know that.
one, I would say that an organic state in an agriculture, that using organic, avoiding use of pesticides and avoiding use of all chemicals, is organic agriculture. Sikkim, as you mentioned, as I mentioned the other day to you, is the first state in India to declare the state organic. Kerala, of course, is another situation. It's much, much bigger. But the advantage that Kerala has is that of a population which is very aware and conscious of clean. Much of our food stuff we are importing. So now from a point of view of Kerala's development, the industries which we are now to depend on is wellness, is tourism, and creating a great place to live in. Creating a great place to live in would mean that our waters are safe, our solid waste is no longer littering our soil, our roads and grounds. For this to happen, it's not easy for a state to go organic. Perhaps there's intermediate stages, like the good practices, good agricultural practices. But somewhere, I believe that the situation such as COVID will give us the capacity to take very strong decisions. And if we take the decision, the big beneficiaries will be not only tourism, not only Ayurveda, but as an educational hub for the country, a place to come and study, a place to come and retire, a place to invest in. All of that will follow. But somewhere somebody has to make a decision that we must go that way. The Green Revolution, they said that it was chemical based, and that is produced. But now I think post-modern is organic. And that's the way that we should go.
Let me take you on your personal journey, how you reached here. You believed, for example, that less is more, the minimalist approach. That you believe that a tourist from Europe would like to walk barefoot on the sand, feel the sun on his face, mud, walking on the mud is all. Now, where did it begin? I believe it began in Bangaram, in the Lakshadweep Islands. Rajiv Talwar is here. He was administrator of Lakshadweep when you were there as well. Can you very briefly tell us how it began? It began with a helicopter ride, I believe, an offer for a helicopter ride from to Bangaram, and that's where it all started. Very briefly, can you tell us?
Let me briefly tell you the story. Yes, Rajiv was here. Rajiv was my administrator, well, my boss, and it was in 1987 when then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi went to Lakshadweep, and he stayed in the island of Bangaram, and the decision was taken to give it that government-run facility to be privatized. We were at that time in 1987, a one-horse, a group with one hotel, casino hotel. Possibly because we were located on that island, we too received an invitation from the Ministry of Tourism to submit our expression of interest if we are interested. The grapevine told me the big of the country are all there, and also the big international brands. So I thought to myself, what chance did we have? The hook, as you talked about the helicopter ride, the hook was that they said that those who send expression of interest will be flown by helicopter and flown back. That was good enough for me. I knew I have no chance. Let me take a flight. Promptly I sent expression of interest. In a batch, we were flown there. We stayed on the astoundingly beautiful island called Bangaram, and we came back. No, we didn't come back, we stayed there. Next day, we were flown to Rajiv's house. The then administrator was Habibullah. And the government house, and the administrator asked us, this group of us, gentlemen, now that you've seen the island, tell us what you plan to do. So the big, naturally I have to answer first. And they said, they dropped numbers like 50 crores, 60 crores, names like Waikiki and Honolulu, and then this is what we plan to do. But we can't tell you exactly what we will do, but for which we'll first do a detailed techno-economic feasibility study. When after they had said, they say, I was asked, what is my proposal? I said, I don't need time to tell you. I can tell you now. Give me 3 months, and I'll put that hotel back on stream. And there was a big surprise. How will you do that? I said, all that I will do is do what the locals will do. Because I believe that somebody coming all the way to the last of the Enchanted Isles, or the Lakshadweep was to experience that island as it is, as the people there made it to be. And with that is the approach I took. And long story, but at the end of it, we were awarded the contract. The hotel that came up there, which opened on 18th of December 1988, the hotel was one without telephone, television, newspaper, air conditioning, room service, all not there. And yet, it was priced. In fact, let me talk about a little bit on pricing. The flagship hotel of India was in Mumbai. It had a big brand. It had a price of US dollars 180, making it possibly the most expensive hotel in India. We found that people who are coming to Bangaram were traveling Munich or Frankfurt, Mumbai, stay there, pay 180, then fly to Cochin. Via Cochin, they go to Bangaram. So then we thought was, how do we price our hotel? If on the way they're paying 180, then the final destination also they should pay 180. So we too put our price $180, 1988, and making the Bangaram Island Resort and the Bombay Hotel the most highly priced hotels in India. One, and then tour operators came to us and said, "How the hell can you do a thing like this?" Which they look at them, they are doing it. But that is that brand. And look at the gold and marble that is there. What do you have? Mud and thatch. Our biggest learning in Bangaram was that just redefine the word luxury to mean experience and not the built ostentation. Then you have that even mud and thatch can be luxury. And that
People like
that
Richard Gere and others came to Bangaram to feel the mud and walk on the sands, isn't it? Richard Gere.
40 days.
Richard
40
Gere,
days.
in fact, like, when you talk Richard Gere, his biggest moment in Bangaram was in the luxury was when he was waiting in queue at the airport where you have to get your passport stamped. He was waiting in queue. The policeman said, and he stepped out of the queue. The policeman said, "Hey, you there, stand here." For as far as Mr. Richard Gere was concerned, that was his aha moment. At least somebody did not recognize me. They told me where I should do, what I should do. But that sense of rawness, that sense of newness, that sense of innocence is what Lakshadweep offered.
Yeah.
That
Rajiv,
idea
come in on
we were
that.
able to bring to the mainland.
Rajiv, can you come in on that a bit?
Sir, I'd
We'll
love
have
to.
a separate session with you in February, but right now, this Bangaram and how did you see Bangaram, the casino initiative in Bangaram when you were an administrator there? Is what Joe's telling all true?
Absolutely true. We were all there. I think when he's talking of that big meeting in 1987, December, there was a shipload of ministers. The meeting of the Island Development Authority headed by the Prime Minister was being held in Kavrati. That's when Bajaj joined. And I was lucky enough to be there from 1996 to 1999. And I was told that I was a nut because 2 months after coming in there, I wrote a letter that this is probably one of the best postings where you can work. The government of India was so helpful that we were able to get a Dornier to be stationed in Lakshadweep, in Kavrati. What to say of getting a flight by any chance over there? And Mr. P.C. Sen was the chairman of Air India and Indian Airlines at that time, an IAS officer, 1965 batch. They actually placed even the crew there. And the local crew for the cabin crew was, of course, local. But let me tell you something about, I'm a great fan of Kerala. I'm a great fan of Malayalis. I think what has made this state great is what a people. What a people. I mean, you don't get the like of them in many places in the world. But this chartered accountant turned hotelier, Joe's Dominique and his 5 brothers at that time, what a team they made, that they started the growth of organic tourism. What do you mean by organic? And what I mean by organic is, I mean, with their coconut lagoon offering, followed it up with Spice Village, Mararikulam, Bangaram Island, Brunton's Boatyard, which provided the first boost of tourist arrivals in Kerala, I think early 90s. I don't know what was the traffic flow in the 80s, but yes, it was early 90s. The facilities were clean, modern and hygienic, comfortable, localized in architecture and food. And I'll come back to that. The appam was not known in India earlier. It was the dosa which was known. But greater, sorry? Appam. And okay, sorry, you know, it's very tough to get, it's very tough to learn Malayalam and it's tougher to get the pronunciation right. Yes. I actually feel that I haven't had enough chilies in my childhood to get the voice like Joe's has. I mean, that's what a gift. And many Malayalis have that kind of voice. And they also have coconut oil, which is great. They also have everything else, which is great. But the architecture and food, non-vegetarian food. If you recall, there was a popular myth in India that South Indian food was dosa and sambar, and it was largely vegetarian. It is when you came to Kerala that you realize that what fabulous non-vegetarian food is available and how clean it is. Ayurvedic spas and wellness, and a personalized experience with very well-trained staff. That's where the people of Kerala came in, that they were educated. It's a study to go there to be back in nature. It's a giant village called Kerala, dotted with cities. It's got everything modern. It's got the city shopping arcades which are modern. It's got people who are very modern because by that time they had gone to the Gulf. Remittances. You have a state, even Uttar Pradesh, the largest state with the largest population, one international, so-called international airport, Lucknow. And look at Kerala. There was a time, and I was lucky to work in the Ministry of Aviation that time, that people, the members of Parliament of Kerala used to come and fight with the minister that how can you have a direct flight from the Gulf to Trivandrum at that time and be charged from Gulf to Mumbai, Mumbai to Kerala. It was a double charge. And then came in private sector enterprise. I think that's where people came in. You had the Cochin airport, you had hotels coming in, and of course, Dominique, his father guiding him, or maybe he was the one who really guided everyone, with all his brothers, George, Mike, Babu. I mean,
You know the names.
yeah, you know the names. I mean, this was a great family enterprise, but it also represented Kerala. That the enterprise of the people of Kerala, educational advantage, health. I can tell you, we were running telemedicine from Lakshadweep to three hospitals in Kochi. They were good enough to give us free facilities and diagnosis. We were getting a daily feed from Malayalam Manorama. I mean, both the brothers, one in Kottayam, one in Kochi, they were giving us, and we were bringing out a rag, a pamphlet of 4 pages, but it gave us daily news in English and in Malayalam. I think the people of Kerala, I mean, they're simply absolutely marvelous. And then came in Jose Dominic in Bangaram. Bangaram and Lakshadweep is like taking a dive into the Discovery Channel. You can actually walk from the shores of the resort, which is very rightly said. I mean, okay, he told me it was $180. We always used to tell the world it was $600 for a double, the largest cottage where Richard
It was that by 2010 it had risen to about $550.
Yeah, there you are. I mean, that's the place, and I actually feel that yes. Sorry, you want to come in?
I'm coming in because it was wonderful to hear you, Rajiv, speak about Kerala, its HDI, its people. I feel overwhelmed. I'm going to go back to, because we're running short of time, we'll hear you in February. And because I'm short of time, I'll go back to, quickly back to Dr. to Jose Dominic.
Can I just add one word? In lifetime's experience, and you have been abroad, I think what Jose has mentioned is waste management, and you mentioned it also. We cannot treat rivers in the rest of India and the backwaters in Kerala as the drain of the last resort. Every bit of waste, whether solid waste or liquid waste, must be treated on land. That's the only way to keep your backwaters clean. That's the only way to keep rivers clean in India. But the Brits probably didn't have the technology that time that they could make STPs, and therefore rivers were treated, and population was smaller. Rivers were treated during British period in India as drains of the last resort. So that's the change which you have to make in your thinking, and that's
so much. Drains of the last resort. That's a wonderful expression. Thank you so much for pointing out that Bangaram was, which was the first initiative that Jose Dominic took, and the sequence of events. He then went to Munnar with Spice Village in 1991 with an investment of 1.2 crores. Then the houseboats in the backwaters in 1993, Kumaragam in 1993 again, Marari Beach Resort in 96, Brunton Boatyard in 2010. But the most important of it, you spoke about Kerala having non-vegetarian food. The interesting part of tourism in Kerala is that in the Rani of Kolungod, the Maharani of Kolungod, wanted the Kolungod Palace to be converted into a hotel. And whom did she approach? She approached Jose Dominic.
Jose Dominic.
Condition, because in that Kolungod Palace, never was meat eaten, never was leather shoes worn, never was wine or alcohol introduced. So she wanted the Kolungod Palace to be converted into a hotel serving only vegetarian food, no shoes, no footwear, no alcohol. And I'll ask as my final question to Jose Dominic, how did you do this magic, Jose? A hotel, a five-star hotel without alcohol, without footwear, and without non-vegetarian food. And yet I believe it was a success.
Jumping forward from the new learnings that we had in Lakshadweep, Bangaram, that luxury is an experience, that the built ostentation is not necessarily what is luxury, meaning of luxury. So from there that was our discovery moment. And from there we made several new investments in Kerala. Now you asked me about Kollangood or the Kalari Kovilagam, which was there. Rani, the Tambirati of the palace, of the Vengana Rajas, in 2004, we changed the name from Casino Group Hotels to CGH Earth. And the Tambirati gave me a call, Jayashree Tambirati gave me a call and said, can you people consider this palace, which is falling on our heads, can you make it into a hotel? So my reply, Rajasthan has proved that hotel, that palaces make brilliant hotels. But let's have a look at it and then we'll decide. We'll see how we can take it forward. Then she added, not a condition, but a big concern. Never has meat been eaten or wine been drunk. And when Lord Wellington, the Viceroy to India, came to our palace, my great-grandfather informed the Viceroy that never has anyone entered the palace wearing leather shoes. So her question to me was, can you make this hotel without shoes, wine, and meat? That gave us the idea that we must disrupt that from hotel, and then let's make it a palace for Ayurveda. And so it was our introduction to Ayurveda. We were new to it, so we chose, we got the best advice, the best experts, and then without compromise, we go that route. And finally, when Ayurveda was set up, the Kalari Kovilagam was set up, it had a price tag of 5.5 lakhs for a 2-week. A minimum stay was 2 weeks, without meat, without wine, and without shoes. Everything complied with, and you pay 5.5 lakhs for it. And very soon, there were queues waiting to get in. So that model is our introduction to Ayurveda, and I think that it could happen. It cannot happen in any other state but Kerala because of the traditions, the Ayurveda knowledge, which, as Sam Pitroda said, make Kerala the Ayurveda capital of the world. And indeed it is. That you say the word Ayurveda, what do people say? Kerala. So if somebody wants Ayurveda treatment, then today in COVID time, they become all the more powerful. A place not to cure yourself of COVID, but to get yourself immunized against COVID. And these traditional medicines will work, the traditional lifestyles will work, and they equally work and our biggest challenge in Kovilagam was how to get Indian travelers to come. We were chock-a-block full, but mainly for people from Europe and US. And finally, we were succeeding that we are from a position of 2%, we reached the Indian component to about 25% of the travelers.
That is wonderful. I'll have to stop here. I'll ask the last question. I have to stop here because we have completed the hour already. My last question is: you're retired now. You're a farmer, so you're farming tapioca, I believe. Now, do you think it's possible to have a farming hotel where tourists come and experience farming in Kerala? Maybe paddy, maybe tapioca, maybe I don't know what. But is that a possibility you see post-COVID?
On the dot. I started my career as an accountant, became a hotelier. Now I'm completely convinced that the farm will be Kerala's next Gulf boom. And at the moment, actually, when I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking from our farm. At the moment, we are now harvesting tapioca. Why did I go for tapioca? Hearing the Chief Minister speak that we need to have food security, to grow maraschini. So I grew maraschini as much as I could, mainly because at least that enabled me to pay wages to our workers in these COVID times. But coming back to the main question is, I believe that the homestead farm will be Kerala's next Gulf boom. And there, what does that mean? That it's the most widely held asset, most dispersed, and it offers something so very unique for people who are stuck and caught up in apartments in cities, people who live lifestyles which are so, let's say, intense and strenuous. What a way! The farm is everywhere. You don't need to travel to across the world. The farm is everywhere, and Kerala has everyone in Kerala is in some sense farmer, from whether from 2 cents or 20 acres. And therefore this opportunity, Italy has done it very well. The agro-tourism, the farm tourism. I believe, from Kerala, which we went from different stages, the next stage of Kerala will be farm Kerala. Before that, it was backwater Kerala. Before that, it was culture Kerala. And farm Kerala offers enormous opportunity, and that will be available everywhere and at different scales at $500 or 50 rupees, all possible.
Thank you so much, Sir Jose Dominic. Agri-farming, agri-tourism, farming hotel. This is how Kerala will perhaps reboot after COVID. It's been a wonderful journey, yours, from an accountant to the doyen of the tourism industry in Kerala. If today Kerala is on the tourism map, if it's a tourism destination for people right across the globe, I think a lot of that credit goes to you and to CGH Earth. CGH, I believe, stands for Clean, Green, Health and Earth. I got it right now. So it goes to you. Thank you so much for being with us. I must particularly thank my colleague, Rajiv Talwar, who came in with those wonderful inputs in between. My only regret, and I apologize for that, is that I couldn't give him more time because we are past the hour. Thank you, Rajiv, very much. When you come in again in February to be our guest, I'll go at length into not only Lakshadweep, the 100,000 island, but also into Bangaram and other places. Thanks again. It's been a learning experience for me to know how costs are determined in the tourism industry, how you are able with minimal inputs get the maximum room price and so on. Thank you so much. Let me hand over the microphone and the floor now to Mohit once again for his concluding remarks. Mohit, the floor is yours. The camera is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. It's always a pleasure to know more about Kerala. And that's how, sitting in Delhi in this cold weather of Delhi, we can come to know of such pleasant weather of Kerala. I'm now getting the idea that as soon as the lockdown would be over and we can get an opportunity to showcase the entire Kerala and Delhi, it would be our first opportunity to do. And in fact, Mr. Joseph, you will recall, we were planning to host a festival of Banaras in Cochin and a festival of Cochin in Banaras, just to bring back what Adi Shankaracharya did to Bharat. And we look forward to such interaction very soon. Meanwhile, we will look forward to know about the stories of Lakshadweep from our very own Mr. Rajiv Talwar. And thank you, Mr. Dominic, for bringing out this aspect of the career shift as well, from being a chartered accountant to what you are doing. It gives a ray of hope to people like us who were bankers earlier and now have chosen something else to do. Thank you very, very much, sir. And thank you, Mr. Joseph. Yet again, a very powerful, very energetic session. And I thanks everyone who were part of the session today. We look forward to have more patronship for all that's Kerala, bringing Kerala to the new horizons. Thank you very, very much. Have a great evening. Namaskar, everyone.
Namaskar. Thank you, Rajiv.
Namaskar.
Thank you both. You're always there. Thanks.
Thank you.